Good evening, everybody. Good evening. My name is Chris Gordon. I am the Programming Manager for Readings. And on behalf of Hachette and on behalf of Readings, I am so delighted that I get to have a bit of a laugh with William. And we get to talk about his latest book. He's searching for something, but let's ignore him just for a minute. And before we get into our talk, on behalf of all of you, I want to acknowledge that wherever it is that you are in Australia, that you are, of course, living on stolen ground. This is land that's not been ceded. We're incredibly privileged to live in this beautiful country. Some of us in the city, some of us by the beach, William, some of us near parks, some of us near rivers. At the moment, I'm speaking from the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And of course, when I start thinking about all these wonderful sort of storytellers and songlines that we have just at our fingertips, just right there, ripe for the taking. I think about all the people that have actually dedicated their lives to making a new sense of the way that we live and the reasons that we choose a certain lifestyle. And of course, when I look at someone like William, who has been a contributor, a commentator for pretty much the beginning of time, what a treat it is to have you here with us tonight. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very, very well. I'm so pleased to be talking to you. I'm so pleased to be talking about your 12th book.
12th?
Is it the 12th? It is, I think.
I think so.
The very first one, of course, was published in 2005. A Man's Got to Have a Hobby.
Yes.
And it seems that you have, in fact, created a lifestyle out of said hobby. And you're now a writer.
Yeah, they're all the same book, really. I mean, you know.
Are they? Are they? Are you all walking down the same street?
People still love a cherry ripe. They still love a crunchy, you know. No.
So
Sorry, you go on.
All right. This latest book, Christmas Tales, is all about perhaps the memories, the golden years of Christmases gone by.
Well, I guess it is. I guess it sort of is. You know, look, I don't take myself that seriously, but I take offence to what you've just... No, I don't. I just happened on a couple of, you know, it was between... Bernadette Foley was a publisher at Hachette, and she came on and said, why don't you write about holidays? So I did a book about holidays, and I did a book about just bits and pieces of your life that you keep in drawers and shit like that. That was full bore. And then I wrote one about fatherhood. And this is like, it's the same sort of thing. But what I liked about this book was I love things that chart a course through someone's life.
Yep.
And Christmas is like that.
Christmas in Australia in particular has got
Yeah. And it's a shared experience, Christmas. And, you know, you're the raggedy-assed kid who can't wait to sort of get stuck into the presents, and you sort of, you know, you believe in Santa because it's too good not to believe in him or it.
I loved your little musing on Santa and the moment that you found out. That's a terrible moment. I guess everyone in a fortunate world, in a middle class world, can remember that moment where you realise that.
Yeah, it's your mum and your dad.
Big old bloke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, that's the sort of way of growing up, you know. And then you sort of become the teenager where you think you're too cool for school, and then the young adult, maybe at uni, you think, Jesus, I've got to go to the olds. This is going to be so boring. Then you start your own family, and then you sort of reacquaint yourself with the wonder of Christmas in a way. And then you go on, and you see what you went through when your kids are growing up. And then all of a sudden, you look at yourself in the bathroom mirror on a Christmas and you think, Jesus Christ, I've turned into one of the old farts.
Yeah. I loved it. You made reference to that in one of the stories, and it made me laugh out loud.
But it's also a way of charting your way through life. And I like that because it's not just my story. It's one of those things you can sort of tell lots of people's stories. And I kind of like that. And it's also a time that you feel loss acutely because you realise that at Christmas, people that you just took for granted would be their aunt. And it's sort of, I don't mind sentimentality, but I think it's a sort of, if I'm being completely honest, I think sentimentality is a little bit sort of cheap. Because, you know, people often try and sort of flog off sentimentality as history, which is just, you'll do that, you'll end up in a really bad place. But melancholy, I think, is a much more sort of accessible and genuine human condition. Because my dad always used to say this great thing, you know, we're all just passing through. And the best thing we can do, we just leave the place nice and tidy for the next tenant. Which I thought, I didn't really get it until a bit later. We're all finite. We all think, you know, oh Christ, another Christmas. But one day there's going to be a time when whatever your faith system, you don't get to go to another Christmas, and all just passing through. And it's a mixture, I think, of sadness, anxiety. You know, you measure your progress through life by other people at Christmas. That's why family Christmases can be.
I mean, they can be pretty crappy, can't they? Let's just have a moment of honesty here. I mean, they can take you to places that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, it's like going to the Corleone family Christmas. And there's all you sort of, at best, you give Michael Corleone or your sister or brother, you give what I think is a present. And it's almost like he wants to go, you broke my heart, Fredo. You can take it back. If you don't like it, we can exchange it. Honestly, and you know, what I do love is about those things where I remember I went back to Queensland for a Christmas, and it was a big family. We all got together. It was after both our parents had died. And my mum always said, McInnes males, they get past 50, they just explode. They go chunky 55 if they're lucky. And I just got out of the car and I was walking up the drive waving to people. And my eldest sister went, at last, you're fat, William. And all you can do is laugh because it's Christmas. And that's the sort of thing. And I thought, oh, yeah, of course, that's sort of nice. But, you know, it's time people want to take the opportunity to open up new wounds, I think. New stabs in the heart can happen. But that thing about, you know, Santa Claus and all that sort of thing, you know, it's like a funny way of you first notice the Santas at supermarkets or shopping centres and at Christmas parties. You know, I was there's a great variety, isn't there, of the big bloke. Oh, yeah. There. And in Redcliffe, where I grew up, there were a couple of beauties. I mean, Vern Sykes was a butcher in Margate who, around December, he usually was the RSL Santa. But he would, he'd butcher and he'd sort of put an effort on. Sometimes he'd put the top on and walk around in his butcher's trousers and leave his apron on. Or I remember once down by the cut price store, my mother saw him and said, Vern has not made any effort at all. And he had the beard, just the hat, and that was it. Yeah. He had a rolled up copy of the Sporting Globe and his butcher's apron. And he looked like it looked like something out of a horror movie. And then the other one I loved was, you know, the way Santa always had to make an entrance somewhere, like he had a fire engine. Or the bell. The bell, or a taxi. Or you know, he arrived at a Redcliffe Leagues Club on a big tractor, big red tractor. And whoever was Santa, I remember, was... He was saying hello to everybody and all this sort of palaver, and he decided to sort of drop kick a ball through the post. And as he kicked it, it was a good drop. He went, Christ, that's my back. And they all had to organise him away, and he was hobbling away. And the master of ceremonies, this is great, get out of jail clause. He's going, Santa's just pulled a muscle there, but he's just going up to get a rub down, and he'll come back, kids. And someone said, is Santa all right? Oh. And there was a pause. And this guy just said, who wants another can of Coke? And everyone forgot about Santa. So there's a whole lot of things. This is an interesting, actually, notion. And when we talk about Santa, because I've read that there's so many kids that are just terrified that Santa's not going to come this year across the world because of the coronavirus. Yeah. Oh, really? This is a new sort of fear that's happening. And I guess in Europe, and in America, that he's not going to be making an appearance because he hasn't sanitized his hands enough. Yeah, exactly. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Like, that's going to be someone else's Christmas memory, is going to be this notion of fear. How did you survive lockdown? Were you all right? Did you cope well? Well, I guess so. I mean, my good friend said if anyone can survive lockdown, it's you, because I was born semi-retired, which is not untrue. It was okay. I mean, I wrote the book and I did a few other things, and I watched Taken, that Liam Neeson movie, about 20 times, and Rambo about 20 times.
So you went back to some familiar territory, back to sort of the 1990s.
Well, it was ridiculous. I didn't appreciate how funny those films were. I mean, they're terrible.
It just shows you how quickly politics changes when you watch a film like that.
I mean, the old guys who can't run and with dyed hair, amazing. I mean, a new appreciation of Roger Moore too as James Bond. And it was just, anyway, I won't go into that. That's another story. But it was okay. I mean, I sort of rang my family a lot, and we Zoomed a lot. And
Zoomed a lot.
And I kind of liked that. I thought that's using a new platform just to, like an old telephone or a letter.
Yeah.
I kind of got it. I really liked it. And,
it did remind me of something in your books, actually. You talk about on Christmas Day, and I do remember this from my own childhood, when the relatives from overseas, I'm from the UK as well, the relatives would ring and it would be at a certain time. But Zoom calls are a bit like that too, isn't it? You don't just create a Zoom call. You go, okay, we'll see you at 6:20,
I think the idea of seeing people is there was something really, the old Bakelite telephone in my father's den, ringing, picking it up, and whoever picked it up and they hear the beeping, it was beep, beep, it was and then they'd scream, it's an overseas call. And we all had to line up, and we all had to sort of have 10, 20 seconds to sort of talk to these people we'd never even imagined existed. And they all sounded vaguely like my father or my mother, these crazy Welsh and Irish accents and weird accents from where they'd grown up or where they were. I mean, I remember, you'd sit there and you hear this, hey, there, no, it's right there. You're right there. Merry Christmas, it's right there. You're there, that's it. But you got the maths, did you? You got the maths? What the family? Oh, that's off, okay. Hey, drinking a bit. How tall are you? When I was the youngest, and I was pretty idiotic, so you got shoved there in line, and if you one of my aunts, my mother's sister, who was still in Wales, she said, hello, Donna William, how are you? Hello, Donna. Donna, you're the youngest. Hey, how are you? What are you up to now? And I'd go, and I remember she said, you must stop that, Donna William, or you'll end up like the postman's boy, Derek. He got locked up. And my mother clipped me over the head, sent me away, and she said, oh, don't mind him, Agnes, he's an idiot. And then they started talking to each other in Welsh, the native tongue, which sounded like a mixture of,
It's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Star Wars. And the other great thing I remember, they'd always send calendars from the Northern Hemisphere.
Viewers, there's a terrific story about this in his collection, but go on to expand. I love this sort of notion of the calendars, the decorated calendars.
Well, we got views of Ireland. It was like sort of all was missing was Val Doonigan in his rocking chair. And I'd look at, St. Patrick's Day, and it would be a public holiday. And I'd go off to school and, you put your hand up and you say, isn't this a public holiday? This teacher at Public Bond Primary said, what do you mean? So St. Patrick's Day said, this woman said, you and your kind of people, you think every day is a holiday. And I thought, all right, what's going on here? And my mother was great. She said, oh, they're completely useless, but they're quite lovely. It's nice to know people care.
Oh, that's so funny. Will you read us a little bit from your book? I think everyone will be delighted to hear you reading, because I always love when you can hear the authors read from their works, because when you're reading it, you get a bit of a sense of the tones, and you've got a particular.
Well, how much can I read? We should have said.
Well, I mean, I imagine you can read for hours, but I'm thinking about 3 pages.
All right. Look, I was going to try and find something about the water pistols and.
Oh yeah, that's good with the palm olive. I love that. You know that.
I watch Where Eagles Dare. I always get texts from my sisters and my brother saying he's zoking in it. I can't explain it now, but if you read the book, you'll find out what that means.
I'm just while he's finding that bit. Do you remember those ads way back in the I guess it was in the 1970s and 80s, I guess, when people used to soak their nails in the palm olive liquid? Well, there's this passage in William's book that made me laugh out loud, like I really hooted. It was terrific to be reminded.
Oh, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. Well, I think I'm going to read this. I'll just read this bit at the end. I'll put it in a précis. I won't read all of it. But there's a story I came across, and I just love. I don't know. I'm a bit of a sentimental old Nick, but I was at a party. This great story. I'll praise it. A friend of mine who was just made for misadventure went to a Christmas party and decided he wasn't going to drink that much. He was just going to stay long enough to say the things, wish that people wear, wait for the speeches and go. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I ended up dancing at 3 o'clock on my hands, wearing someone's thongs after insisted that the band or the DJ put on Flock of Seagulls, I Ran. And I said, what happened? He said, the Three Wise Men. And I said, what? And he went, Three Wise Men is this drink. It's a Christmas drink, apparently. And it's a shot of Johnny Walker, a shot of Jack Daniels, and a shot of Jim Beam. Oh. And I said, mate, that sounds like rocket fuel. He said, oh, there's Three Wise Men. One makes you feel very warm and wise. I said, what was the problem? He said, I think the problem was always all the other Three Wise Men I had. And he was just talking me through, all the things you shouldn't do at a Christmas party. And that was sort of funny, never let yourself be photographed, stay away from social media, never tell anyone what you really think, whatever about them, And I found myself just after he told me this at a Christmas do, and there's this guy, he was a really nice man, and I was a bit wussy. And he's just saying, I just can't get into the Christmas spirit, He's the sort of guy any of us could have been, he didn't really like the government, but he didn't think much of the opposition. He knew he should be happy and thankful, but there were too many people being laid off at work. It made him feel guilty and lucky, and he hated being that. And he says, there's just so much, and this is all pre-COVID. He says, there's just so much awfulness in the world. And he said, I just don't feel much Christmas spirit. And I went on this great big, big Spanish-Gallian will saying why it shouldn't. And I just told him a few things of what I'd found that had happened to me that particular year. And I couldn't remember his name. It was mate, and I was calling him, listen, mate, this is another reason. Now, Chief, let me tell you this. Listen, champ. You can't remember someone and they remember you and all that sort of.
Of course.
And I'll just I love this bit. I do. I nearly cry every time I read this. I told him, Chief, of how that year I'd heard from a friend about a mutual acquaintance the other day. The acquaintance had walked into a newsagent's while killing a bit of time and had decided to get a scratchy ticket and won a large amount of money. This person had never bought a scratchy game before, had never even engaged in any form of gambling or any games of chance. My friend wasn't really envious, but couldn't quite get over the randomness in the result. It's not like he needed the money, he said. It sort of doesn't seem fair. Like, why didn't someone get it who deserves it? I took this opportunity to borrow a line from the Clint Eastwood classic, The Unforgiven. Deserves got nothing to do with it. My Christmas drinks friend looked at me and said, that's a little existentialist for you, Will. What do you mean? It's just luck, I said. Well, whatever that means, said my friend. Luck. Years ago, for some forgotten reason, I took our dog Doug, a marvellous Kelpie mutt, to the local dog club for obedience lessons. Doug was far too clever to pay any attention to anything any human was going to try and impart. And I wasn't much chop at wanting Doug to be anything other than Doug, our dog. So we didn't progress much through the dog obedience classes. The club did invite us to their Christmas party, though, and I bought a raffle ticket and won a Christmas tree that was decorated with 100 scratchy tickets. 100. People thought I was very lucky. Took the tree home, and my family spent an hour and a half going through the scratchy games. Didn't win a thing. Luck's a fortune, as they say. My family and I sat around our dinner table taking turns scratching the tickets, and after each unsuccessful scratch, we erupted in laughter. When we decorate a Christmas tree these days, there's a star made from a collection of unsuccessful scratchy games from that night. It still makes me laugh. And I tell my gloomy chum, Matey, about how a rather grumpy taxi driver navigating thick city traffic had asked me, out of the blue, if I'd bought a lotto ticket for the big prize that night. No, I told him. I bet once a month for 40 years, never win a cent, he said. Right. He told me of a friend who'd bought a lottery ticket many, many years ago and won, but it was all soon gone. The taxi driver told his friend he was a fool. His friend laughed and kept on buying tickets, but never won again. I asked if his friend was still buying tickets. The driver said his friend was dead. I said I was sorry. The driver shrugged. We all die sometimes. I would visit him once. I said, you used your luck up. The driver looked at me. He just laughed. In hospital, I went to see him. I bought him a lottery ticket and gave it to him. And he didn't win. He laughed. All his family laughed. He used up his luck and he laughs. He was a good friend, a fool, but a happy man. I went to pay the driver. He just stared ahead. When he died, he left me an envelope inside a gift for me. He rummaged in his wallet and held up an old lottery ticket. Never even checked if I won, but I keep him close to me. He was a good friend. I got out of the taxi and the cabbie said my luck was to have him as my friend. He was my lotto. Oh, I can't go. It makes me cry every time. I tell you, I told that to my brother, who's older. My father used to call my brother the flagship. And Vaughan went, did you give him a tip? I said, yeah. Was it a big one, Will? I said, yeah, I gave him $20. He said, do you reckon you're the first person he's told that story to each other? I went, whoa! But I just love that story. And I think...
You love it because it says something about friendship, because it says something about sentimentality?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I like that. He was a fool, but a lucky man. The idea that he'd carry something as silly as a lotto ticket, but say I've never even checked if I won because it doesn't matter. It's my friend. And Christmas is like that, you know. That star we put on, you know, my wife made that, my daughter. And it goes on the Christmas tree. And, you know, it's such an acutely emotional time because you remember everyone who's gone. And of course, it's like when my parents, after those phone calls, they'd just go for a walk by themselves and you'd think, oh, well, that's just them doing something. But I realised later on that it was they remembering maybe their school friends, their friends, before they immigrated to Australia, in Ireland, Liverpool.
Gee, they were brave, weren't they, those people?
God, yeah. And they came out here and then they, you know, that few sweet moments where you realise, I mean, my parents, they thought they treated, I mean, they weren't that religious. I mean, my father's famous words was, know how to cross yourself, know who to ride with in trouble, but for Christ's sake, never take religion too seriously. Which I think is just, you know, always get ahead in life, but make sure you leave a bit of slack for other people to have a crack. And whatever you do, always look behind and make sure no one's left too far behind. And you think, for a right-wing Labor guy to say that, you think, man, that should be tattooed on a statue somewhere. But he looked at Christmas as being a time when you shouldn't be happy. You should be thankful. You should celebrate. That was your day for a life well lived that year. And I remember we had things, you know, the hampers, you know, the hampers. There was this one year, we used to get the Maya hamper.
That's very fancy. We never got anything so fancy. I think we got Venture, the Venture hamper.
Well, let me tell you, they went all out, you know, and they put a little bit away each week for the Maya hamper. And when that thing bloody arrived, we were like the Pirates of the Caribbean opening up a treasure chest because you get this food you'd never get any of the, you know, those tins. And my father would always, here's the tin of Tasmania, because it was a triangle. There's a plum rose tin in a tin. You had to open it like that. And we used to
always sealed so well.
We used to call it Rolls-Royce spam because it was proper ham. And those boxes of chocolates and nuts in a little sort of netting sack. Sugared almonds. And we love pickled onions, you know. For some reason, we all just love pickled onions.
So this is what I did learn about you, William, that you, every year in your stocking, got a jar of pickled onions.
Because...
It struck me as something very unusual.
I guess it was something to go into, you know, we all got
it was a bit English, perhaps, a bit kind of from the UK. I mean, I don't
know. It was a very, but no, we're Irish. Well.
And did you really just pop one of those little puppies in your mouth straight off on a Christmas morning?
Every birthday, whoever's birthday it was, got a thing of pickled onion. You had to race them to their room, stick a pickled onion in your mouth, and you just laugh yourself silly at the sort of faces people would make. And the stockings we had were my mum's old stockings.
Her real stockings.
Yeah, and then we had Christmas photos of us with all the stockings over our heads, making faces. And my mother said, let's get this year's mugshot of the bank robbers. It was such a great house to grow up in. I mean, we weren't poor, but I knew we didn't have much. I mean, we got an above-ground pool one year, I thought, for Christmas.
A Clark rubber, perfect.
But I thought, well, it's not a proper pool. And my dad said, what are you talking about? He says, of course it's a proper pool. He said, do you like toads? I said, no, Dad, I hate toads. He said, well, that's got a built-in toad barrier. Okay, it's a proper... He said this great thing, he just topped the top of it. He said, concrete, son, you can't trust it. It cracks. Why do you think they swim so bloody fast in the Olympics? I know, that makes sense to me. And the next year was the 72 Olympics. And I got into trouble because the teacher said, a great teacher called Miss Law. Yeah. She was the one.
They were a bit scary back then, weren't they?
Are you kidding me? Miss Law, when Nixon went to China, she made us all stand up and say, you have to pray that these two men won't blow up the world by lunchtime. And we did.
Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. Imagine if some teacher said that in primary school now.
Well, you get run out of town. But she said, what do we all think about Shane Gould? Isn't she wonderful? And I put my hand up and I said, she's frightened of the cracks. That's why she swims so fast. I was sent to the headmaster for something I'll never forget, for lewd talk. And then I went home and it went there. This awful headmaster said, I have sent a letter to your father and mother and they'll have received it, explaining why you're in trouble. And I went home and I didn't even take my port off, and my father came out there. She said, you come here. I went, oh, God. He said, you talking blue, are you? And I thought, that's even worse, because I understood what blue talk was. It was when sort of one of the grown-ups swore. And he said, give us a letter. I said, you've got it. I said, I know I've got it. I had to ask you that to make sure that you know what's going on. He said, what did you say? And I told him, and he looked at me. He said, what did you say? He told me, and he just, when he laughed, he's a big, strong guy, and he laughed, and he just sort of ripped open the sky when he laughed. And he said to me, he said, you don't say this is a proper pool. And he flicked the water at me, and he said, this is the gift that keeps on giving, boy. He's a great guy. He was they both were such mad, wonderful, lovely people. I remember one Christmas, we got a, K-Tel Christmas, you get a K-Tel compilation album. And then for some reason, someone got a K-Tel exerciser that you sort of stuck on a door, and you sort of heaved yourself up like that. And my mother was just having a fluffy duck, because she always liked fluffy ducks.
Oh, a little bit of avocado and lemonade.
Oh, yeah. And then someone put their sold out was their collection, and Barry White came, we're going to love it, baby. And my father, seriously, he was using this thing, giggling to himself on the French doors, and he'd go, coming up, going down. And my mother would sit there going, it's alive! Like, that's, to me, the sound of Christmas. It was this archaic, chaotic, silly fun, making a meal out of not very much. And, that's the
so
sort of thing.
It seems to me that when I read your book about Christmas, that you have all these gorgeous memories and these family times and these sort of musings about it all. But perhaps somewhere deep down there's a disappointment that Christmas has become so commercial and in that way become a little bit more trite. Is that a fair representation of how you're going?
This is perhaps someone claimed my left-leaning view. No, I do. Look, you don't have to look very far to see the crassness of Christmas.
Yeah.
And the hypocrisy a lot of the time.
Yeah. And
the emptiness, and why people are miserable at Christmas. And, we were always taught, as long as you're having a good time, you've got to make sure you give to other people. You've got to make sure you put yourself out. I kind of like the idea of Christmas being a heightened form of citizenship. People grumble about these random acts of kindness around the Christmas time. I'd say that's bullshit. I don't believe in random acts of kindness. I think there's good citizenship. It's just being a good citizen. And I think, and all year round. Yeah, Like, let's take a leaf out of your dad's advice, really. But it's sort of funny. I mean, I kind of like people making money, turning coin and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the great redemptive spirit, that Dickensian idea of Christmas, I love Christmas. I just adore that. I just love it. There's a little taste of Thatcher right there, and you. Well, yeah, I guess, I mean, just, you know that thing, Fred. People say Fred's a bloody plot dog. Oh, bullshit. He's a great bloke. I love Fred in Christmas Carol because he's just a good egg. You know, he just says, listen, there's many good things that I do that I may not profit by, and that's okay. And I think you don't have to have this big redemptive operatic journey like Scrooge does. But if you go on it, that's great. But Fred is just there saying, you know, we're up and down, but if we just sort of try our best, not
just
all
keep
the
moving
time.
forward.
Yeah, keep going forward. And I love that. I mean, I'm a big Dickens fan, but I just love that book to death. And I love all the versions of it from, you know, Alistair Sim to Bill Murray. I
love the Bill Murray one. Right. I just adore it. I really do, William.
I don't like his birth, you know, like Bill Murray. But yeah, I know. But, you know, it's funny, you know, after my mum died, I went to a midnight mass and I sat there and I thought, man, what am I doing here? I am so fucking miserable. You know, I'm just missing the people.
Just desperate, like a heart attack. It felt like you were having a heart attack pain. Was it like that one?
Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah.
At the end, and you know, it wasn't offensive. The homily was really nice and warm and not at all, it was welcoming. But it was a bit, I thought, oh, well, whatever. But at the end, when you are asked to say to the people around you, peace be with you. And I just felt, when I said it and someone said, peace be with you, I got this handshake and I thought, oh.
And someone you didn't even know. Yeah.
That's what my parents loved. And a number of times I thought, this is okay. This is all right. There's a worth here. And you shouldn't be too cynical about it. You shouldn't just think you're the only person who's ever lost someone that you deeply care about. You know, it's like, you know, you're all passing through. It'll happen to me one day. And hopefully someone will sort of get a bit mopey about, I can't imagine who, but, you know, someone getting a bit mopey about me not being around anymore. But, you know, Christmas is a time at its best when we're a little bit better than we are. And at the same time, we are overindulgent. We are greedy.
Yeah. It's the paradox that you just love, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the great thing. You know, everyone can be a multi-tiered character at Christmas. And it's also, there's all those ancillary things that I love about Christmas films and, you know.
The carols.
Well, I tell you what, I used to host occasionally the singing set in the Yarraville Gardens by this wonderful old guy called Ron Palmer, who, was an old right-wing Labor guy. He was just a jet. He was a bomb of a human being. I had a voice like that all the time, you know. Hey, and every time he turned up to sing, go to the carols again, son. A bit more have been fallen off. I said, Ron, are you travelling? He said, I'm upright, and every day you're upright. You're not 6 feet under it. Hey, Ron. And he was a return man. He fought the Second World like my old man. And he did this thing, and you go there, and it was all chucked together. And sort of, you know, people would come who couldn't really sing, and they had some people who could sing, but no one took it that seriously. And it was just a really beautiful time. And you'd look across the Maribyrnong River to the city of Melbourne, and the port lights were as if our suburb, they were our communities decorated. It was magical, you know. And I got half the things wrong. I didn't know half the people I was introducing. No one minded, you know. But there was this one wonderful night when Ron wasn't very well. He was nearly going shuffling off the coil. He was talking with his son, David Palmer, who's a lovely boy too. He's a great bloke, David. He's kept them going. And he was laughing, like he was just laughing. And he had this another guy who'd laugh. He'd sort of heart as big as the outback and soul as big as a morning sky. It was just beautiful, man. And I said, what are you laughing about, Ron? He said, I love this bloody country, boy. I said, why do you love it, Ron? He said, look at that bloke there. Look at that bastard there. He pointed to this African-Australian guy who was not getting angry, but he was just telling this other guy to sit down. He said, and the other guy he was telling was a Chinese Australian to sit down. And because that bloke, the big bloke telling the little bloke to sit down, is trying to photograph or video this Vietnamese Australian on stage who was singing White Christmas. And sweat was boiled all over, and Ron turned to me, this old guy who'd grown up in a homogenous Australia who thought maybe we're going to be about 7 million people he'd sort of seen all these changes. He'd seen all this flux in society, and he embraced it and wrote it. And he said to me, if anyone tells you, son, this is not the greatest bloody country in the world, they're kidding themselves. What a bunch. And I thought, man, that sort of gusto and love of life. I mean,
what I'm imagining is when you're at these type of events and your kids would have been sort of running around. I remember when my kids were young, you'd sort of could let them go at these sort of events, these primary school gatherings or the local community cricket club gathering. You'd all meet there, and it didn't matter if you didn't see your kids for a few hours because someone else did.
Everyone's all right. That's like an old-fashioned idea of when we were kids. And I mean, you know, bad things happen to people for no reason. But on those nights, you just think, man, this is the bomb, this place. It really,
that's right.
It's really something beautiful to celebrate.
Have you got a favourite memory of Christmas when your children were growing up? One of our listeners are asking, a lovely woman called Belinda, is saying, what's his favourite memory of his kids when they were growing up?
I wrote about it in the last book, which was a bugger because I thought I could write about that. And I thought, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, you used it all up, didn't you? Yeah. You got to pace yourself, William. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that, but it's all about the pace.
Oh no, I like to think that I'm old Chautauqua or a swooper at the end. You know. I came back from working interstate, and I came back on Christmas Eve, and my foot said, my boot hit the first step, and I heard Doug bark, and there's a long hallway in the house, and I heard him bark and bark, and he started running up. I heard him scraping, and then I heard my kids' voices. They didn't say anything. They just yelled, and then they were coming up the hallway, and I got there, and I opened the door, and Doug was jumping up, and both my children gripped either side of me, my legs, and they just hugged me, and it was like a beautiful thing, like, you know, butterfly hugging you or something. This sort of, they just gave it everything they had, and
that's all you needed, wasn't it?
Down the end of the hall, smile at me and wave, and I smelled the Christmas tree, and I thought, man, I'm home.
Yeah, and I'm a lucky bastard. I hope.
You know, you feel like a Packer mixed with a Murdoch, mixed with a Getty and a Rockefeller, and you think, even better than that. I just feel like I'm a happy soul and I'm content. And that was probably, you know, but there's also fantastic stories, you know, playing a game, a thing called dog bingo, where, you know, kids, they can't say words.
Yeah. But they make them up, and I miss that. I miss that. I loved that.
A new nickname, Why Marana, and she looked at it, she said, "We murderer." Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I guess it's always family related for me. I think it's sad.
What do your family think about your writing when they read? Because, geez, you're merciless, really, aren't you? I mean, you're using their fodder.
He got cranky with me a couple of times.
Did he? Yeah. Yeah. Who can blame him, really?
Yeah, and my son's over it. My youngest doesn't want to know about it, really. But I've kept them out of it a bit, I think. But it's more often than not. I don't like writing about me. I suppose I do. But I write about the people I see. And I kind of think, seriously, if I could be, I mean, if I'm trying to think seriously about myself, which I find it impossible to do, I kind of think, I like that taxi driver story because I don't think anyone would write about that guy. And it's such a beautiful story. And I kind of like the surprise. I had a movement teacher at drama school who I thought was absolutely barking mad, who said to me, you should treat people like a universe to be explored and cherished.
You're a gatherer.
And I'm going, what the fuck are you talking about? And then I got on and I suddenly was on stage looking at all these people, and I thought, Annie Stainer was absolutely right. Like, people are little universes to be enjoyed and, you know, discovered. And, you know, the differences are as enjoyable as the similarities, I think. And I guess if I try and do anything, I try and sort of write about that. I mean, It's not all, blowing
So
bubbles out.
would you call yourself, how would you describe your writing? Would you call yourself a gatherer of people, or would you call yourself a reporter, sort of a muser, like that you just take these kind of, where have you gone? Who knows where he's gone now, but I'm sure he'll be back. I don't know what he's done, but that's all right because we're nearly out of time. And I will tell you that I would consider that this book, this collection of stories about Christmas, are about, they're about the way that William McInnes sees the world. They're musings. They are essentially a wonderful sort of collection of memories and, I don't know, regards on how we live. It's quite beautiful. Someone has asked me in the chat function whether or not there's an audio book, and my friends, he even reads the audio book. It is one of those books that you could take to the beach and you would possibly read sections of it out loud. I do highly recommend it. On behalf of Readings and on behalf of the wonderful publishers Hachette, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for shedding a tear with William, for having a laugh with this extraordinary man, a man that's given us so, so much joy. To you all, a very Merry Christmas. It's been a pleasure to have you here tonight, and keep reading. That seems to me the most essential message that I can give you tonight. Farewell, my friends. Farewell.